But first, should taxes go up to raise more cash for the armed forces? 0207 862 2222 is the number. Now, the government is resisting calls from defence experts to immediately boost military spending as an emergency meeting over European security takes place. Keir Starmer is joining other leaders from the continent today amid fears that they are being sort of sidelined from US talks with Russia over Ukraine and that President Trump will pull away from NATO. Now, the government won't say that they're going to, when they're going to raise defence spending to 2.5% of GDP, which will cost an extra £5 billion annually. And this morning, it was suggested to the Health Secretary Wes Streeting that Labour could raise taxes to gather the extra cash, given the scale of the crisis. Here's the exchange with Wilfred Frost of Sky News.
If necessary, should taxes go up, some of the taxes that were understandably at the time manifesto pledged, because it's needed because of new events and national security?
Look, we don't treat our manifesto lightly. We made all of those commitments in good faith, and we are determined to carry them out and to deliver every single one of them. We've had to make some unpopular decisions in the last 7 months, but we've made those unpopular decisions because we believe they're the right decisions to get Britain out of the massive hole it was left in. And we have to do that at the same time as confronting the challenges we see in the world.
So I don't think he answered whether we would be increasing taxes. But how would you feel about a situation where your taxes could increase more of your paycheck out in order to secure the safety of the country?
I would feel good about that, Storm. Look, we cannot, as a nation, carry any more austerity. And so if you're asking me, well, where are we going to get this money from to increase our spending on defence? Something that we are being told of that is necessary, because I understand that Keir Starmer met with a number of the chiefs of the different Navy, Army, etc., defence departments on Friday, and they were saying, look, we are in a desperate situation, and we know that what's happening across the world as well. So, look, are you asking me, do I want to support our country to protect ourselves? Of course I do. And would I be willing to pay taxes for that? Of course I would.
All right. But first, should taxes go up to raise more cash for the armed forces? 0207 862 2222 is the number. Before the break, we heard from Paula, quite happy for our taxes to go up to secure the country.
Yeah, a two-pronged approach, though, Storm. So we're also looking at cost-cutting. There is room within the Ministry of Defence itself for there to be cost-cutting. So it's a two-pronged approach.
So cost-cutting, quite a lot of waste when it comes to defence spending. What's your view, James? Happy to increase your taxes?
Absolutely not. Look, let's be really clear here. We have the highest tax burden that the nation has ever had, or certainly since the Second World War. We're just about to see a whole raft of tax increases, which were totally unnecessary, driven by Rachel Reeves and her, daft-headed approach to understanding economics, and I think we all know why now, that the policies seem not to match what her aspirations are. The top line, grow the economy. Great. The action, terrible. When we have a look at our spending, we are spending billions of pounds a year on overseas aid, which I understand. In the good times, fine. But when you start to analyse, there are some great programmes in there, but there's also some waste. Could we look at that and reappropriate? What's more important, that we spread our word around the world for people who are less fortunate than ourselves, or alternatively, that we look after our nation's security?
Why does there have to be one without the other, James? Why does there have to be one without the other?
Because there is no room for putting up tax. The tax changes that have been made by the government have increased our borrowing costs, which means that more of the money that you and I and all of us are spending in tax are now going to service debt, because the daft-headed approach by this government and the mistakes that they have made, financial mistakes, it's not politically driven, my comments, it's just financial mistakes that they are making. And we never look at, well, what are we spending? And you started to touch on it there, because you probably saw over my shoulder and realised that I was going to rip into you for the nonsense
No, to be
that
fair,
you were talking before.
it's the Labour government. It was the Labour government when they were in opposition. They undertook their own research, and their own research came up with the figures in terms of the wastage of the Ministry of Defence in itself.
But don't look at the Ministry of Defence, because if you start to have a look at that, so they're spending less now pretty much than they were 15 years ago, and I'm happy to blame the previous government who took their eye off the ball. So we've seen welfare spending go up from 150-something billion to over 300 billion a year, and yet defence spending was at about 57 billion and we're now at about 54 billion. So my view is, if the military need 5 or 10 billion, we can find it in overseas aid. We're also spending 6, 7, 8 billion pounds a year on asylum seekers and hotels and all this stuff. Process them more quickly. Get rid of those bills. It is unnecessary expenditure.
So look for that money. You do think the money needs to go up, but look for that money elsewhere.
Yeah, well, look, we need to increase our defence spending now. We need to make those changes now. And I agree, let's stop putting helicopters in sheds and not using them, and poor technology and throwing money, after projects that shouldn't be pursued. But we've got to make sure that our armed services are ready for action. The world has changed. They're not going to wait for a sort of gentle curve and a gentle, set of governments to sort of ease the changes in. But increasing our tax now is not the right way to do it.
OK, interesting. So you both agree on the spending more. And actually somebody else that might agree with you is Tobias Elwood. Now, speaking to Matt Allwright on Jeremy Vine earlier, the former Defence Minister said that it was vital to spend more money on security. Take a look.
What is the future of NATO as America focuses on other parts of the world? We must realise that Europe is increasingly on its own and is looking increasingly vulnerable as Putin now grows in strength and is the most powerful leader in Europe. There is certainly a security leadership role for the UK to play, but ultimately we can only do that if we invest far more in defence.
But where is that money coming from? That's what we're asking you. Would you be happy for taxes to be raised, to be spent on defence in such times that we are now? 0207 862 2222 is the number for your calls. We're going to go straight to those calls and speak to Oswald from Leicester. What's your view on this?
Storm, people paying more taxes. I don't think people really got a problem paying more taxes. It's where the money is going to go. Do they spread it go on?
I'm wondering whether you don't trust the government to ring-fence that additional tax and put it in defence, or whether you don't trust defence not to waste it on helicopters that get kept in sheds.
There's the wastage and ring-fencing all in one. It all needs to be sorted out.
So what do we do then, Oswald, if you don't want taxes to be increased? Do you think we need to spend more money on defence or not?
It's a bit of both. Spending it, but make sure it goes in the right places. OK,
Oswald, thank you very much for your call. Callum from Denbighshire, tell us what you think on this.
Honestly, I agree with the gentleman that was speaking earlier. We do need a complete overhaul of the forces completely, because I was speaking myself ex-service and trying to rejoin as a private again.
Okay.
The resources are completely lackluster. Vehicles, like you say, are being bought and barely even being used. And I know it's not in this subject entirely, but the islands that are out near America way, that we have bases there, they're selling that, getting rid of that, and then we're paying for that. So
OK, so you think there's severe mismanagement when it comes to defence. Does that mean we don't put any more money into it? It feels like at the moment, with the sort of global situation that we find ourselves in, the instability in certain regions, is now not the time to be putting more money into defence, even if they are sort of wasteful at times?
I think that money should be put into it, yes, and I also think that the recruitment should also be pushed as well a bit more.
Well, I mean, Callum, they are trying to recruit more. Nobody's interested in becoming a soldier and entering the armed forces in any capacity, it would seem. Apart from you.
Considering what's been going on with the government, I wouldn't be surprised, I'll be honest with you.
It's starting to feel, Callum, that there's more than one problem here, which might be why a lot of people are reluctant to say that they'd be happy for their taxes to go up to be spent on defence.
And I'm unwilling for it, to be honest with you. We do definitely need it.
What do we need to spend money on, Callum? Because hasn't warfare changed?
Yes, I think spending on obviously getting the troops sorted out, and then on getting training more money spent on training to train the troops up to the right standard, considering like we're having like drone strikes in Ukraine now. That's like a completely different warfare that we're not even used to. I mean, that's the first time we've ever seen that sort of thing happening. And then you've got like on top of that, like we're not in the Afghanistan wars anymore. We're not fighting insurgents as much. It's more like if World War III kicks off, we're going to be fighting a global war again, and it's not going to be the same. It's going to be a completely different theatre.
Yeah.
But I think Callum, I think you make some really interesting points about that, which is I don't think we hear enough necessarily from military experts to talk about the changes in warfare and what's actually required. But also, I think as a society, one of the things that we seem to have almost forgotten is the prestige that used to exist within the armed services. And one of the reasons that perhaps younger people aren't so keen is that prestige isn't there in terms of the career that you might have afterwards, the way that you're viewed in society, all those sorts of things. Because I don't think when it comes even to teaching in schools, we don't necessarily big up, if you like, what they've done in the past and what they do now, and the prestige isn't there.
There's quite a few industries like that, actually. I think everybody wants to be an influencer now, it would seem. Callum, thank you very much for your call.